This video is about chess, the corporations playing both sides from the onset, and black people representing the moral argument on the chessboard, the good, if you will, and white people representing the oppressor argument on the chessboard, evil. It quite often is seen in terms of the good is the left and the evil is the Republican Party. Okay. Bear with me, you'll see what I mean by this. I know. Number one, evil starts off making the move, right? There's a need for discussion because of systematic injustice. And if you look carefully at that argument, it must include reproduction and breeding. There is the slave trade and the slaves having their breeding controlled. I think we can all agree on that. There is segregation, Jim Crow, redlining, etc. And how separating people a certain way affects who they reproduce with. People tend to have sex with the people they live by. There's eugenics, which a lot of people haven't thought about enough, but certainly when we see transhumanism and eugenics and so on brought up by conspiracy theorists, the word is getting out about eugenics. It is the history of scientific, corporate and college supported, mind you, right? You need more than an education to free yourself from this. Control of reproduction. The scientific control of reproduction so that one race can be seen as superior was the true driving force. The stated philosophy was to address STDs, sexual misconduct, right, licentiousness, sexual immorality, criminality, okay, and first and foremost, perhaps, intelligence. They say 3 generations of imbeciles is enough, right? That's what this book by this, I believe, Harvard lawyer wrote in the Harvard Law Review, I believe, Adam Cohen, is about. Right? 3 generations of imbeciles is enough. Okay. But of course, the IQ test and forms of intelligence and their meaning, right, aren't explored enough. And I cover this to a large degree. But let's stick with the chessboard. You know my arguments if you watched my videos before. Let's just look at how this chessboard plays out and why you must know gang stalking is real, sabotage is real, and that you would be shocked if people weren't ganging up to sabotage me when you consider what we already know through mainstream politics. The chessboard. So it starts with a systematic injustice. Evil makes its move. Good counters, okay? They counter by saying the system is racist. This is the root cause of the problem. Black people and minorities in general, minus the token minorities, never were allowed to get on their feet. Of course, the true root cause is only partially addressed. There's more to it than that. There's a large grouping of people outside of the stated system that are responsible. Corporations, golf clubs, social clubs, political groups, the iron triangle of economics and sociology, and so on. Okay. The deep state, the politicians themselves are referencing these days, more and more. So evil counters. They say, well, black people are lazy. They have no excuse, right? They're exaggerating racism, right? And if there is racism, it's at least partially justified in the system, and it's not a big enough problem to say that that's the determinant here. Look at Africa, especially how it is governed. Why can't they govern themselves? This is almost a complete misrepresentation or lie, but there is complicity with the African people. This book covers it very well. William Easterly, I believe he's white or Jewish, I believe. The White Man's Burden. Why the West efforts to aid the rest have done so much ill and so little good. Okay. This book is partially addressing the problem. It is worse than he states even, right? They purposely have brought down African people. Confessions of an Economic Hitman make that quite clear. It's a book as well. I suggest you read it. I don't even have to read it thoroughly myself to know that it proves my point. And that there, when you read between the lines, it proves my point more. Now here's where it gets tricky. The response isn't publicly known. Publicly known, we see this chasing your tail. The system's racist. No, it's not. The system is racist. No, it's not. Back and forth, okay? With a lot of ignorance and oversimplifications and overgeneralizations being used. The obscured argument that we see from time to time in the news goes something like this. Africans are hardworking. Study their individual cultures. Many examples can be used. They face geopolitical sabotage, neo-colonialist, internationalist exploitation. And the nations were purposely created because the local tribes didn't get along. That's how the British, the French, and the Western powers purposely sliced Africa so they could control them and favor one group over the other and create mutual distrust and competition so they wouldn't unite to rebel against their colonialist oppressors. And of course, they use various means: religion, social philosophies, economics. Right? It's the social, political, and economic sabotage of groups that they combined into a nation. All right, and then they fed into their mutual resentment, okay? Because they already didn't want to be governed. That's why they have tribes, not one big coalition. You know, they traded with each other, but they didn't want to be under the same government. Then you put them there. So it's quite disingenuous for them to pretend that these puppet governments that they have installed in nations that they have created because they wanted these people who didn't get along to be ruled by them, you know, from far away through their proxies and so on and so forth, right? You know, that this has nothing to do with it. It's very disingenuous. So evil then says, hey, this is the information age. People are going to come to that conclusion real fast. Here comes the disinformation. Here comes the controlling the opposition, right? Corporate sabotage, if you will. And remember, they're already controlling the opposition to a certain degree. This is something historically we see, period. You know, you have to plant your spies. The kings have their spies. Okay, the trade route guys have their spies. This has been going on for thousands of years. It's just they start to say, to what degree do we need to control it to address the problem? What are undercover cops? What are informants? What are assets of the CIA and intelligence agencies? The ghetto, the GIP, I believe was called the Ghetto Informant Program, had over 12,000 informants to keep the black community down on record, not to mention others that are privately owned informants and so on and so forth. And that's just one program during the Black Panther era, if you will. So ultimately, the corporate partnerships that control the dating sites, mind you, and advertise through them in a way that ultimately feeds into the culture that causes people to buy more products and to feed their oppressors' bank accounts more, right? Their piggy banks, okay? So once you see this, right, obviously we must look at it as a reproduction war. Now we've moved to a position where only a small group of people are playing chess anymore. Everyone else is stuck in the controlled opposition or chasing their tail moments, right? So the masses of people are saying, it's racist, no it's not, stupid example, kind of good, stupid, and so on and so forth. And then there's the people making a more academic and effective example, okay? So we have the masses, then we have a fair amount of people stuck in this stage. Only myself, from what I gather, to maybe a few others, are talking about reproduction and who should be dating who and why, and I'm the only one talking about the martial art order as the highest point of reference. Okay, martial artists are the most righteous people. They're the most respectable people. First and foremost, women must be looking up to them and dating with them and everything relative to them. The geek who is more like them, the cop that is more like them, and so on and so forth. Period. I don't see how anybody could even make a valid argument, and that's why it doesn't get to this point. Now, once we realize you've narrowed it down to me, where is the vast majority of sabotage aimed at this point? You would be shocked if they didn't start to blind me, if they didn't start to suppress my videos. You would be shocked. They own the sites. They own the dating sites. They control the political movements, the social movements, the criminal movements. They control these things. People are scared little puppets that don't date heroes in the information age, that don't have a large following because they're not controlled opposition buttercrumb, pansy, sissy bitch. Are we clear? It is delusional. It takes a delusional, disturbed, crazed, megalomaniac, selfish fool to not know that I am sabotaged. Period. Thank you.